Hi, welcome to Codevo. In this episode of Daily Dose, we'll be covering two Wipro coding interview questions. Let us get to the first one. The name of the first one is TryitOut of. So what is this TryitOut of? Let us see. First we are given a statement. Let us read the statements and this describes our question. After reading this question, we'll move on to the logic that we are going to apply to solve this question and then to the coding part. So let us start with the passage. So in an online maths tutorial, a student is given a list of n numbers. So from this list, the student is required to sum each element in this list such that the ith element in the output list will be equal to the sum of the first element till the ith element. So what is given here? We are given an array of numbers as input. So what we have to do is we have to change the value of each element to the sum of all these numbers till this ith element. Let us move on to the example to make this question a bit clearer. So we have to write the algorithm to calculate this sum of these elements. Okay. So here we are given an array as input. So our output array should be the sum of all these elements till that element. So for the first element, there is nothing to the left of the first element. So obviously it would have the value of 1. Okay. But for the second element, that is 5, what we have to do is we have to sum the value till 5. So the second value would be 6. And similarly, the next value would be 1 plus 5 plus the next value, that is 3. And hence we will get the value of 9 and similarly the value of 11 for the next consecutive sequence. So what we'll do is we'll have a sum variable. So while traversing this array, we'll find this sum and we'll assign this sum to their respective corresponding element. So in this case, when we find 6, we'll assign it to that element. In this case, the index is 1. Similarly, 9 and 11 would be found, and while finding that sum, we'll assign it to the respective index as well. So we'll move on to the code and program this logic. So here we are given a main function. In this main function, we have 3 parts. First is the input part, which contains the given numbers. So n is equal to 4 and then the array. Okay. And then we have the function call, that is the ith sum function is being called with these 2 arguments. And then we are printing that array at the end. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to initialize the value of sum to the 0th index. As we saw, there is nothing to the left of the 0th index element, that is the first element, and hence the sum value can be initialized straight to the first element. So int sum is equal to array of 0. Okay. Now we traverse this array from the first position till the last position. We are skipping the 0th index because there is nothing to the left of the 0th element, and hence the sum till ith value for 0th index would be the same element itself, and hence we are ignoring the 0th index in the for loop, and we are starting from I is equal to 1 and we are moving on till I is less than n, I plus plus. Okay. So what is the first step inside this for loop? We have to update the value of sum to each element. We have to add the array of I element to the sum value for each iteration. So sum is equal to sum plus. So we are adding the existing value plus the new value that we are currently pointing to. So in the case, the currently pointing value would be initially 1 and then 2 and then 3, and similarly. So we are having sum is equal to sum plus array of I, and the sum part is done. So what do we have to do next? We have to assign the sum value to the corresponding ith element, right? So sum till ith element, and hence we have to assign this sum value to the array of I position. So array of I is equal to sum. So that would complete this program. So when we run this program, we'll get the same output as 16911, as we can see here. We have got the output as 16911, and that is the output for this question. So now we'll move on to the next question, that is security key of. So what is the security key? So first we'll read the question and then move on to the logic and then the coding part. So here we have the statement. A company is transferring data to another server. The data is in the form of numbers. To secure the data during the transmission, they plan to obtain a security key, and that will be sent along with the data. The security key is identified as the count of the repeating digits in the data. So we'll write an algorithm to find the security key for each data, that means each number. So the question says that we are given a number. Let us skip the part of the backstory that we are transmitting data and just focus on the part what we have to do. We are given a number and we have to find the security key for this number. So what is the security key? How do we find the security key? We find the security key by counting the number of repeating digits in this number. So the number of repeating digits in the given number would give us the security key for the corresponding data or number. So let us move on to a sample input. Here we are given a number. So in this number, what do we have to do? We have to find the number of repeating digits, and that would give us the security key. So how many digits are repeating here? We have 27, 28 and 23, and the rest the count is 1, and hence we will ignore that. So there are 3 elements that are repeating, 7, 8 and 3, and hence the count is 3, and obviously the security key will also be 3. So the answer to this sample input would be 3. So what logic do we use in order to find this value? The answer as 3. So we'll take this number. So we are getting an integer, and hence to get each element's count, we'll have an array. This count array will be used to store the count of each digit. We have totally 10 digits, right from 0 all the way up to 9. So we'll have the total size of this array as 10, and the 0th index will be storing the count of 0. First index will be storing the count of 1 in that number, and similarly the last index, 9th index, will be storing the count of 9 in that number. Okay, so here we have no zeros, no ones, and similarly we'll have 2 7s and 2 8s and 1 9, and similarly we'll fill this array first. So for that we'll traverse this number that is given to us using a while loop, and then increment this value of this count array. So that is our step 1. The step 2 would be to use this count array and find the total number of repeating digits. So how do we use this count array and find the total number of repeating digits? So we have the count of all the numbers that are given to us. So using this count, if the count is greater than 1, what does it mean? If the count is 0, it means that number is not there. So let's leave that. So if the count is 1, it means the number is there, but it is there only once. But we don't want that either. We want the total number of repeating digits, and hence the count must be greater than 1. That is, it should start at least from 2. So what are we doing? We are traversing this array element by element, and till we reach the last element, the condition that we are checking is if the element that is stored in that position is greater than 1, then increment the value of count. So what is this count? This count is the security key that we need. So while traversing this array, what we'll check is that element that is stored in that index, whether it is greater than 1. If it is greater than 1, increment the value of count. So this would be the second for loop that we'd use, which would traverse this array, and then it would give us the security key that we need. So this is the logic that we are going to use, a constant sized array. So this constant sized array, count array, would store the count of all the digits that we need from that given number. So we are not having a string or an array. We can't just use a for loop to traverse this number. So what do? Since we have an integer, we have to use the percentage 10 concept. I mean the modulo 10 or remainder concept. So when we have a number and we divide it by 10, the remainder that we get is the unit digit of that number. Let us say we have 11. We divide it by 10. What is the remainder that we will have? We have 1. And that is the unit digit of 11. Yes. So 11 has the unit digit of 1, and that is the remainder that we got. So this percentage 10 or remainder concept can be used to find the unit digit of each number, and we'll divide the number by 10 continuously and use this remainder concept, and this would help us traverse this whole number. So we'll move on to code now and program this logic. So here we have a main function. This main function involves the integer input that we have got, the num 57837, the same number as we saw in the explanation part. Now we are calling the security key of function with this num as the input. So this would pass on to this function. So we have to complete this function in order to complete this program. So what do we need? First we need that constant sized array. So what is the size of this array? 10, because we have 10 digits from 9 to 0, right? 0 to 9, 9 to 0, whatever. So we'll first initialize that count array. So count array of 10. What is the default value that we need? The default value, let us say, as 0. So since we are counting the digits, the default value would be 0, and we'll increment the values if we have if the value is present in that number. So now we'll move on to the part where we traverse this number. So we'll have a while loop for that, and the condition that we are going to use for this while loop would be the number should be greater than 0. Once we complete this while, we'll get a very clear idea what this while loop does and how it helps us to traverse this whole number. So the first step is, as we saw, we have the number, we divide that number by 10, and the remainder would give us the unit digit, that is the ones digit. So let us have a digit variable, use this as a temporary variable that stores the unit digit of the given number. So num percentage 10 or num modulo 10. This would give us the unit digit of that number. So what do we do now? We have the unit digit. We now add it to the count array. So this count array counts the total number of digits. So where do we, if let us assume this digit has the value of 5 in it. So where do we store it? We have to store it at the index 5 in the count array. Since we are starting from the digit 0 at 0 index, the 0th index of this count array would store how many zeros we have in this number. So at index 1 we'll have how many ones we have in this number. Similarly, the index 9 would have how many nines we have in this number. So we are assigning count array of digit plus plus. So this would increment the value from 0 to 1, and similarly if we are at 1, it will increment the value to 2. So this is the logic, and we will have one more step remaining, that is we have to divide this value of number by 10, because let us say we have number 11 as we saw earlier. So we need to traverse this 11, so there are 2 digits, hence first percentage 10 or first iteration will get the first unit digit, that is 1, and now we have to divide this 11 by 10 in order to move on to the next digit, else we'll just doing this infinite times and we'll just have one digit, that is the last ones digit. We'll not move on to the 10th digit, we'll not move on to the 100th digit, we'll just be stuck at one digit if we didn't do this step, and hence this step is very important. So that helps us traverse this whole number. Okay, now that this while loop is done, what do we have at the end of this step? We have a count array that has the count of all the digits that is present in this number. So if we have 5 ones, we'll have the value of 5 that is stored at the index 1. Similarly, it is stored for each and every number. So what do we do now? We now traverse this array as we saw, and then if the array has an element that is greater than 1, it means that number is repeating, and hence we'll increment the value of security key, that is the count. So we'll have a value called as security key, and this is our answer. We'll assign it to 0. Now we'll have a for loop. This for loop would traverse this count array loop that we just created, and as we know, it is a constant sized array, and hence we can just give the value of the length of the array as 10, and we'll increment the value of I. Okay, so what do we do inside this for loop? We have to check the condition, that is if count array, so count array of I is greater than 1. This is the condition as we saw. This means that element is repeating. If the element is repeating, we have to increment the value of security key. So yes, we have the spelling of security key, right? And this is the condition that we are going to use. So if it is greater than 1, it means the digit is repeating, and hence we are increasing the value of security key. So after this whole for loop ends, we'll have the security key, that is our answer. So we'll return that security key, and the main function would print that value. So security underscore key is returned, and that is the end of this program. So we'll run this program and verify our output. So as we saw in the original example, our output should be 3, and that is the answer that we get here, because the elements that repeated are 7, 8 and 3, right? So there are 3 elements, and hence the count is 3. So here we are at the TryitOut session. If we pass this given number 365214 to the function that we just completed, the security key of function, what is the output that we would get? Let me know your answers in the comment section below. If you love this video, please drop a like and comment down below if you have any questions. And don't forget to click the subscribe button. So we'll see you in the next episode of Daily Dose. Until then, bye bye.